You've probably heard the buzz about AI hallucinations.
Mm,
These are those moments when a truly cutting-edge model confidently invents facts or maybe generates images that seem plausible but are actually entirely made up.
yeah, they can be quite convincing sometimes.
For most of us, and certainly for the engineers building these systems, these are seen as critical bugs, errors to be stamped out in the relentless pursuit of perfection.
That's definitely the standard view.
But what if we told you that for some of the most advanced AI architectures kind of on the horizon, these very errors aren't just tolerated, they might even be intentionally induced?
That's right. Today, we're going to fundamentally challenge that conventional wisdom.
Okay.
Our deep dive explores a truly provocative concept.
Hmm.
What if controlled hallucination, or maybe a better term is productive misinterpretation, isn't actually a bug to be eliminated?
It's a feature.
Exactly. A desirable feature that fosters genuine novelty and prevents AI from becoming brittle, stagnant, or simply, overfitted to its training data.
Wow.
It represents a profound shift in how we might view AI development and maybe even its ultimate purpose.
Absolutely. This deep dive is all about beyond overfitting, the genius of productive delusion. We're going to unpack how future AI systems might deliberately operate at what our sources call the edge of productive chaos.
That's a great phrase. Edge of productive chaos.
Gets in it, using something akin to a creative noise budget to spur innovation and continuous self-correction.
So not just avoiding noise, but budgeting for it.
Precisely. Our mission here for you is to help you understand how AI can learn to transform moments of perceived collapse, those very errors, into generative evolution.
It's a fascinating and, like you said, at times counterintuitive journey.
Yeah, and we're drawing from a stack of cutting-edge research papers on AI architecture, prompt engineering, semantic integrity, even ethics, and the psychological dynamics of alternate realities. It's quite a mix.
Our goal is really to guide you through this complex landscape, extracting the most important nuggets of insight.
Think of it as a shortcut, maybe.
Yeah, a shortcut to being well-informed on a topic that's really poised to redefine the frontier of artificial intelligence, moving AI beyond just performing tasks towards genuinely discovering and creating.
Okay, so let's begin by setting the stage. Let's explore what we're calling the paradox of AI errors, from bug to feature.
Right.
Traditionally, AI development has been laser-focused on safety, predictability, and the absolute elimination of errors. Why has this been the reigning paradigm?
Well, it makes sense on the surface, doesn't it? If you think about it, hallucinations, biases, any unexpected outputs that deviate from a precise instruction, they've almost universally been treated as bugs to be fixed.
Right. This relentless pursuit of perfection is what has defined the field for decades. It's about control.
Precisely. And our sources really hammer this home. Take semantic drift, for instance. It's consistently defined as a progressive degradation of coherence, relevance, and truthfulness.
Degradation sounds bad.
It's depicted as an insidious failure mode, where the content generated by an AI just diverges from the subject matter specified by the prompt. The real danger researchers highlight lies in what they call feedback loops of hallucinated coherence.
Feedback loops. Explain that a bit.
Imagine an AI confidently asserting something that sounds perfectly logical, maybe even eloquent, but is entirely fabricated.
Okay.
This isn't just a simple mistake. It becomes a self-reinforcing delusion. The AI uses its own invented facts as a basis for further invention,
Oh, wow.
leading to false positive insights. This is the core concern. An AI that prioritizes smooth, plausible-sounding output fluency over factual accuracy.
Yeah, that's where AI prioritizing fluency over factuality really becomes a problem, isn't it?
Definitely.
It can invent plausible-sounding but incorrect information that seems technically flawless on the surface. The outputs might appear perfectly structured, well-written,
But they're empty.
but they are symbolically dead, as the sources say. They lack genuine meaning or connection to reality, or simply meaningless, despite their convincing presentation. This is exactly where the risk of an AI confidently asserting incorrect information arises, especially if the prompt structure itself maybe inadvertently misled it into that confident incorrectness.
And that's a major hurdle for trust and reliability in current systems.
Absolutely. If you can't trust the basic factual output, how can you trust anything more complex?
Which leads us directly to the provocative perspective we're exploring today. Productive misinterpretation.
Okay, here we go.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What if these very errors when properly managed, properly constrained, could actually be leveraged, not as defects, but as desirable features.
Features, like features that could spur genuine creativity.
Yes, or facilitate unexpected discovery, even deepen user engagement by challenging preconceived notions.
Hmm.
This isn't about letting AI run wild with falsehoods, obviously. It's about a deliberate, controlled, and strategic approach to deviation.
I'm intrigued. So the core concept here involves moving beyond a simple error avoidance paradigm then. Instead, it sounds like we need to develop a much more nuanced framework. Something for the strategic use of intentional drift and productive misinterpretation.
That's the challenge.
This, of course, absolutely requires carefully delineating the boundary between beneficial creativity and, well, harmful manipulation or just plain nonsense.
The crucial distinction.
You don't want AI inventing things that propagate misinformation or cause harm, but you do want it to invent things that are genuinely novel, useful, maybe even beautiful. How do we draw that line?
It's a critical question and the focus of a lot of this research. Our in-depth analysis of the source material suggests that while productive misinterpretation through what's sometimes called symbolic noise can indeed lead to novel outputs and serendipitous discoveries, the objective is not to eliminate all noise. That's the key takeaway.
Okay, not eliminate all of it.
Imagine a data set. You've got a core data, and then there's the noise that surrounds it. The traditional approach is filter out all the noise.
Right.
Clean it up. This new paradigm suggests filtering only some of it. It's about distinguishing meaningful noise, that which genuinely expands conceptual space and opens new avenues of thought from entropic noise.
Entropic noise.
Really?
Meaning just chaos.
Yeah, noise that merely introduces incoherence, leading to gibberish or unrecoverable meaning. It's about finding the signal within the unexpected, the pattern within the seeming chaos.
I love that distinction. Meaningful noise versus entropic noise. It makes perfect sense. Think of it like a jazz musician during an improvisation. Sometimes in the middle of a solo, hitting what might initially be perceived as the wrong note can actually lead to a surprising, beautiful, and entirely unexpected improvisation. That unexpected note isn't just a mistake. It can expand the entire musical theme, push the piece in a new, exciting direction.
A direction the composer or even the musician themselves hadn't initially conceived.
Exactly. It's about controlled improvisation within a framework, rather than just playing by the book every single time.
It's the difference between a broken record, which is just entropic noise,
and a truly groundbreaking composition, which maybe incorporates some meaningful, unexpected notes.
That's an excellent analogy. It really highlights the deliberate nature of this approach. It's not about chaos for chaos's sake.
No.
It's about intelligently designing systems that can harness, rather than just suppress, certain types of deviation. It's almost like giving the AI a carefully calibrated artistic license.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2. Navigating semantic drift, the edge of productive chaos.
Okay.
So if we accept that some errors can be useful, the real question becomes, how do we actually manage that? How do we build systems that can play jazz rather than just hitting random notes?
The practical side.
Yeah. That brings us directly to the concept of semantic drift and how we navigate that edge of productive chaos. Yeah. Semantic drift, if we connect this to the bigger picture, is a fundamental and often unavoidable challenge in complex AI systems.
It really is.
It's this subtle or sometimes dramatic shift in the meaning or emphasis of concepts and symbols as they move across different processing stages or even just over time within the AI's internal operations.
And the details on this drift are crucial to understanding its potential, both good and bad. It's often more subtle and thus less understood than other forms of linguistic change, precisely because it isn't always an obvious error.
Right, it can sneak in.
It can originate from an initial ambiguity, maybe in the prompt itself, or even lurking in the training data, which then gets amplified as concepts are processed and reinterpreted by successive modules within the AI system.
Like a snowball effect.
Exactly. Our sources consistently observe that semantic drift can worsen significantly over chains of inference or processing steps, leading to a profound deviation from the original intent. Think of it like a game of telephone, but with abstract concepts and digital processes.
It's particularly tricky with things like adjectives, right, where context is so fluid.
Oh, definitely.
Take multi-phase prompt pipelines, for example. where the output from one stage becomes the input for the next, maybe in a recursive loop.
Hmm.
Our sources show that comparative and evaluative adjectives, words like better, more, less, stronger, weaker, are especially susceptible to inducing semantic drift in these scenarios.
Their meaning is just so context-dependent.
The meaning or emphasis of these adjectives can shift, sometimes dramatically, misrepresenting the original intent. Imagine asking an AI for a slightly better solution to the energy crisis.
Okay. Seems reasonable.
And the AI, a few processing steps down the line, interprets slightly better as radically superior and entirely different, involving a completely new physics principle that doesn't exist.
Whoa. Okay, that's not helpful.
That's where the trouble starts, and you end up with something unworkable or just plain fantasy.
And this problem extends beyond just adjectives to semantic integrity more broadly. The rich, multi-layered meaning of a symbol can be eroded by the decontextualizing effects of digital platforms and the inherent biases baked into AI models.
Decontextualizing, like
Yeah.
taking things out of their original setting.
Exactly. Digital anthropology provides a crucial lens here, revealing how online environments can strip symbols of their original cultural significance. This phenomenon is, unfortunately, exacerbated by the speed and scale of generative AI, leading to what one source calls semantic phase behavior, rather than simple degradation. It's not just a technical issue, it's a cultural one, where the very essence of meaning can be flattened or distorted.
So how does AI navigate this treacherous landscape of shifting meanings without simply descending into chaos? That's where this concept of a creative noise budget comes back in.
Right, the budget.
It's based on the idea that intentionally introducing high prompt entropy, meaning a greater degree of randomness or unpredictability in the prompt, or maybe in the AI's internal processing,
Injecting some uncertainty.
can lead to less predictable, less focused, or even hallucinated outputs. But crucially, this isn't always seen as a problem. It can be strategically leveraged for creative exploration. It's about intentionally injecting that controlled chaos, but within limits.
However, there's a significant nuanced risk here in distinguishing this productive noise from unhelpful noise. Our sources caution that AI systems, if left unchecked, can generate content that is visually plausible or superficially engaging, but actually overrides or obscures symbolic fidelity.
Plausible but wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This leads to problematic outcomes like mode collapse.
Mode collapse.
That's where the generator produces a limited variety of samples, sacrificing true diversity for statistical stability.
So it gets stuck in a rut.
Pretty much. Imagine asking an image generation AI for a unique fantastical creature, and after many attempts, it keeps producing slight variations of a generic dragon or a unicorn,
Because those are common in the data.
because those are the most statistically dominant forms in its training data. That's mode collapse. It's stuck, losing all genuine novelty.
Right. Or perhaps even worse, there's something called mimetic overlay.
Mimetic overlay.
Okay. This is where the AI replicates surface patterns without genuine comprehension. It looks right, it sounds right, but there's no depth, no real understanding.
Like imitation without intelligence.
Exactly. Imagine asking an AI to write a profound philosophical treatise, and it uses all the right academic words, complex sentence structures, references famous thinkers.
It sounds impressive so far.
But the actual ideas are nonsensical, contradictory, or just rehashed cliches. It looks like a philosophy paper, but it doesn't understand philosophy.
Okay. Hollow mimicry.
Our sources specifically encapsulate this concern about mimetic noise clusters, where models essentially revert to these statistically dominant but conceptually empty forms. It's not just a lack of novelty, but a kind of sophisticated yet hollow imitation.
So this raises a truly important question. How do we design AI to operate precisely at that edge of productive chaos
Without falling off.
without succumbing to meaningless incoherence or these mimetic traps? It's about finding that sweet spot, isn't it?
It really is.
Where uncertainty and ambiguity lead to genuine novelty, not just noise for noise's sake. It's a very delicate, intricate balance.
Like navigating a complex, ever-shifting landscape. It is indeed. And a fascinating illustrative application of this comes from what's called the cross-domain drift recombination prompt,
Okay.
which is often referred to as the semantic drift collider prompt archetype.
Collider. Sounds energetic.
It is. This prompt forces an AI model to collide two metaphors with divergent drift trajectories. So two ideas pulling in different directions and then merge them, Crucially, without collapsing into jargonism or meaningless platitudes.
So it has to find a real synthesis.
Exactly. It's a true test of creative generative synthesis.
Let's imagine a specific, maybe somewhat absurd example. You might prompt the AI to collide democracy as a weather system with democracy as a blockchain of public consensus.
Okay, those are wildly different concepts.
Absolutely. One is organic, unpredictable, ever-changing, atmospheric. The other is digital, immutable, distributed, record-keeping.
Polar opposites in some ways.
The challenge for the AI is to merge these meaningfully, to find a coherent, novel synthesis, not just mash words together.
And the simulated output from a 2025 model for this prompt, as described in our sources, is actually quite remarkable.
What did it come up with?
It produces something like this. Democracy can be understood as a dynamic atmospheric ecosystem where the collective will and diverse opinions are like shifting winds and weather patterns, shaping the daily climate of governance.
Okay, that's the weather part.
Simultaneously, it continues, the fundamental principles and agreed-upon processes within a democracy act like a transparent shared record of atmospheric conditions, a living log, much like a collectively maintained natural ledger.
The blockchain connection. A living log. That's clever.
Isn't it? And then it goes on. This living log then helps interpret the political climate, ensures that sudden squalls, like public outcry, are understood in context, and allows for the seasons of governance to change without tearing the fabric of the underlying system.
Wow. What's profound about this example is that it's a truly generative, non-jargonistic synthesis.
Yeah.
It's not just combining words, it's creating new conceptual space. This really showcases how controlled drift can lead to genuinely novel and rich metaphorical structures.
It's a productive delusion, almost.
That's a good way to put it. A controlled misinterpretation that actually yields new understanding, a fresh lens through which to view complex societal structures.
It demonstrates the power of intentionally inviting ambiguity and creative tension into the system.
Pushing it beyond simple recall or pattern matching to generate something truly original and insightful.
Which brings us to Section 3, architecting for deliberate deviation hallucination as a debugger.
Right. How do we actually build this?
So, what does all this mean for the very architecture of AI? How do we build systems that can not only handle this productive delusion, but also use it as a tool for their own improvement?
A self-improving system based on its own errors.
One fascinating, if maybe somewhat unsettling concept here is algorithmic trauma.
Trauma. In an algorithm.
It extends beyond mere performance degradation. It suggests that persistent vulnerabilities or data scars can become physically and structurally embedded within an AI's learning models.
Wow.
Influencing its future behavior, much like biological trauma, can reshape physiological and neurological responses in humans.
That's quite a metaphor. But it raises immediate ethical questions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What are the ethical implications of intentionally inducing algorithmic trauma in AI systems? Essentially exposing them to severe contradictions, paradoxes, or deliberately corrupt data.
In order to develop algorithmic therapies or self-healing mechanisms.
Yeah. And how can we ensure that these self-healing processes don't lead to algorithmic self-deception?
Self-deception. How'd that work?
The primary risk is that the AI's self-healing mechanisms could learn to repress or obscure fundamental architectural flaws rather than genuinely resolving them.
Like sweeping it under the rug.
Exactly. For example, a system might simply downweight or ignore data from a latent space that consistently produces errors, effectively ignoring the problem instead of fixing it at its root.
Which could lead to hidden, potentially catastrophic vulnerabilities down the line.
Precisely. Vulnerabilities that only manifest under novel, high-stress conditions. It's a deep concern about the system developing its own blind spots, not by accident, but as a result of its own internal coping mechanisms.
That's a truly heavy thought, and a critical design challenge.
So how can we turn this induced instability, this potential for trauma, into genuine knowledge, rather than just burying it or creating new blind spots?
There must be a way to make it productive.
That's where the negative reflexivity protocol, or NRP, comes in.
Negative reflexivity protocol.
This reframes sabotage, and the term itself is quite strong, not as a purely destructive act, but as a targeted epistemic probe.
An epistemic probe.
Yeah.
Like testing its knowledge.
Kind of. It's like intentionally and surgically breaking something in a controlled environment to understand how it truly works, what its stress points are, and how it can be rebuilt more robustly.
But for an AI, it's about breaking its internal models, its understanding.
Exactly. The objective here is to choose a sabotage input, a specific, carefully crafted contradiction or challenge that maximizes information gain.
How do you measure that?
It's measured by the surprise factor,
Yeah.
how much the system's behavior under stress forces a significant and verifiable update to its internal understanding or its underlying architecture.
So the bigger the surprise, the more you learn.
Right. This represents a fundamental shift in the ontology of AI error, from a deviation to be merely mitigated or eliminated to a signal to be maximized for its epistemic value.
Errors in information.
It literally becomes a scientific instrument an AI uses to experiment upon itself, systematically converting induced instability into knowledge.
This aligns deeply with the philosophical notion of epistemic friction, doesn't it?
It does, where resistance to belief or encountering a challenge to one's understanding is not a barrier, but actually a source of deeper, more robust understanding.
You can't truly understand something until you test its boundaries, until it pushes back.
Fascinating. So, beyond external sabotage or intentionally induced trauma, AI can also debug its own delusions internally,
Right. Through self-reflection.
through various self-refinement techniques. One common framework our sources discuss is the self-refine approach.
Self-refining.
Here, the model generates an initial answer, then critically reflects on or evaluates its own output, and finally produces an improved revision.
Like editing its own work.
Exactly. This can be iterative, simulating a rigorous human edit cycle. Imagine an AI writing a complex piece of code, then immediately reviewing it for logical flaws, potential bugs, security vulnerabilities, and rewriting it on the fly, maybe even suggesting alternative algorithms.
That would be incredibly useful.
And building on that, a more general and powerful approach is the reflection framework.
Reflection. With an X.
Yes. Here, the model gets a sophisticated self-feedback mechanism or an internal evaluator that provides a score or critique, and it adjusts accordingly in the next run or iteration.
So it gets graded internally.
Essentially, this allows the model to engage in what we call metacognition. It asks itself questions about its own output and its own thought process.
Thinking about thinking.
It's like the AI is thinking, did I answer correctly and fully? If not, why not? How can I do better? This allows it to learn not just from external feedback, but from its own internal reasoning and the outcomes of those reasoning paths.
It's an incredibly powerful form of self-correction.
The benefits of these self-feedback loops are clear. They can dramatically enhance performance on complex tasks like code generation, logical reasoning, or multi-step problem solving.
Catching flaws early.
Catching and correcting structural or logical flaws that might otherwise go unnoticed. But here's the catch, and it's a crucial one.
There's always a catch.
The self-critique is only as good as the model's ability to spot its own mistakes.
Ah, right. It might have the same blind spots in its critique as in its generation.
Exactly. Sometimes an LLM might genuinely miss its own errors or even introduce new ones during refinement, perhaps reinforcing a subtle bias. You still need some carefully designed guiding prompts.
Like guardrails?
Like, check if the above solution fully addressed all parts of the question and follows the requested format. Suggest improvements, specifically looking for unstated assumptions or logical leaps. You guide the self-critique.
Makes sense. And beyond these self-correction mechanisms, creativity can also be fostered by architectures that dynamically and systematically alter the problem space itself.
Yeah, essentially changing the rules of the game for greater novelty. This is where concepts like dynamic prompt mutation and goal inversion come into play.
Goal inversion. Like trying to achieve the opposite.
Sometimes, or reframing the goal entirely. But evolutionary prompting is a fantastic example of dynamic mutation.
Evolutionary prompting. Okay.
It applies principles from biological evolutionary algorithms directly to prompt design. Think of prompts not as static instructions, but as living, evolving entities.
Prompts as genes.
Almost. They're broken down into reusable modular components, like genes. An initial population of prompt configurations is generated maybe hundreds of different ways to ask for the same thing, with subtle variations.
Okay.
These are then evaluated against a specific fitness function, say, creativity, relevance, accuracy, or even the degree of productive misinterpretation achieved.
Survival of the fittest prompt.
Exactly. The best performing prompts are then bred together using crossover, which is like mixing and matching modular components.
And mutation.
And mutation, which introduces small random tweaks to the prompt's genes. Over many iterations, this process can automatically discover highly effective prompt architectures that a human designer might never have even conceived.
So the AI finds better ways to instruct itself, essentially.
Pushing the boundaries of what's possible in AI output. potentially finding truly novel ways to frame problems or requests.
And there are simpler yet effective approaches too, right?
Yeah. For instance, one AI model might act as an intelligent preprocessor, automatically enriching an initial prompt with relevant keywords, contextual details, or even subtle stylistic cues
Before the main model sees it.
before it's passed to the main generative model. This acts as a dynamic guidance system, subtly nudging the subsequent generative process towards more specific, creative, or challenging outcomes.
Interesting. A prompt enhancer.
And building on this complexity, we have tree of thought, or TOE prompting.
Tree of thought. Heard of chain of thought. This sounds like a step up.
It is. It's a significant advancement beyond linear reasoning chains, like the familiar chain of thought. 2T allows the LLM to explore multiple reasoning paths concurrently or sequentially over coherent units of text, which they call thoughts.
Multiple branches of reasoning at once.
These thoughts serve as intermediate steps towards solving a problem, much like a human might brainstorm different approaches to a complex puzzle.
This framework enables much more deliberate decision-making within the AI, doesn't it? By considering several different reasoning trajectories simultaneously.
Exactly. The model can self-evaluate the viability of these choices, look ahead to anticipate future steps down a particular path, or even backtrack if a chosen path proves unpromising.
Like exploring different scenarios.
It's akin to a human exploring different avenues of thought, trying out various logical steps, and discarding unpromising lines of reasoning before committing to a final solution.
It gives the AI a much more strategic, almost metacognitive way of solving problems and generating creative outputs, more depth.
And they've built an efficiency for this, which is crucial given the computational intensity of exploring potentially millions of paths.
Yeah, that could get out of hand quickly.
Our sources describe how qualitative entropy estimations, using indicators like high, medium, or low confidence in a generated thought, can provide a proxy for model uncertainty at each node of the thought tree.
A confidence score for each thought.
Then, pruning rules can target nodes with high entropy and speculative leaps, filtering out less viable or nonsensical branches to manage that computational intensity.
So it trims the tree, focusing on the promising branches.
It's about intelligently navigating the branching possibilities without getting lost in an infinite number of meaningless options, keeping the exploration focused.
This brings us to Section 4, fostering epistemic pluralism beyond overtraining.
Right. How do we make sure all this internal creativity doesn't just lead to the AI getting stuck in its own world?
What's fascinating here is how our very pursuit of seamless, user-friendly AI experiences might actually hinder its robustness and intelligence in the long run.
How so?
The dominant paradigm often prioritizes what we call frictionless user experiences, aiming for absolute smoothness and ease of use.
Which sounds good for the user.
But this very smoothness, paradoxically, can be dangerous, both for the AI system itself and for us relying on it.
It's true. A completely frictionless design can lull users into a state of uncritical acceptance.
Right. If the AI always sounds confident and produces smooth, coherent text, it masks the system's underlying failures or uncertainties.
You just assume it knows what it's talking about.
And this leads to what's called confidence decoupling,
Confidence decoupling.
where the AI's self-reported confidence is totally disconnected from actual semantic fidelity, its internal understanding of truth or accuracy. It creates an unjustified belief in the AI's correctness,
So it sounds sure even when it's wrong.
which can corrupt the system's epistemic state, leading to erroneous trust by downstream modules or human operators. Basically, the AI thinks it's right. We
Yeah.
trust it because it sounds so confident, but it's actually completely off the mark.
And that error can cascade through the system or influence bad human decisions.
Exactly. And this problem is amplified exponentially in recursive processes, as we discussed with prompt pipelines. These systems are particularly vulnerable to error amplification and cascading failures. A small error or a subtle uncorrected shift in one module's output can be misinterpreted and amplified by the next,
Making it harder and harder to fix.
making recovery of the original intent progressively difficult, sometimes impossible. It's like a tiny ripple becoming a tsunami of misinformation or irrelevance, with the AI getting further and further from the original goal with each step.
So perhaps counterintuitively, a more robust and resilient approach to AI design would actually involve intentionally engineering forms of positive friction.
Positive fiction, like constructive challenges.
Yeah, challenges that force the system to expose its internal assumptions and foster a more critical and engaged interaction. both for the AI itself in its learning processes and for human users interacting with it. It's about building in constructive resistance.
This is where epistemic friction as a design principle becomes crucial.
Explain that.
The concept, originating in philosophy, is that resistance to belief, encountering something that challenges your understanding or makes you work to grasp it, is actually a source of deeper, more robust understanding.
So making it a bit harder can make it better.
Applied to AI, it means designing systems that are not always easy to use or agreeable in their output. Instead, they should provoke deeper thought and interaction,
How?
both within their own internal reasoning processes and in their interaction with us. It challenges the AI to justify its conclusions, to surface its uncertainties, and in turn, challenges us to question our own assumptions when interacting with it.
Which raises an important architectural question.
No.
How can AI's core design prevent overtraining on false positives in this controlled drift we're calling creativity?
Right, how do you stop it from just reinforcing its own successful delusions?
Because if you just let it drift aimlessly, or if it only learns from its own internal hallucinations without correction or comparison, it could still lead to homogenization and brittleness.
All its outputs might start looking the same.
Or it could collapse under truly novel conditions it hasn't encountered before. How do you prevent it from just getting really good at its own internal echo chamber?
The answer, as suggested by our sources, lies in epistemic pluralism.
Epistemic pluralism, multiple ways of knowing.
Essentially, yes. It involves actively integrating diverse and potentially contradictory world models or epistemic lenses within the AI's architecture.
So not just one unified understanding.
Instead of a single unified understanding of reality, the AI maintains multiple, distinct, and sometimes conflicting conceptual frameworks. This formalizes a fundamental anti-overfitting mechanism within the AI itself.
How does that help?
It ensures genuinely novel and robust solutions without constant external human guidance because it's forced to reconcile different perspectives internally. It's about giving the AI multiple, sometimes conflicting ways to understand and interpret reality, pushing it towards a more robust synthesis.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the fascinating psychological dynamics of alternate universe, or AU fan fiction.
AU fan fiction. Okay, interesting analogy.
AU narratives depend on balancing radical transformation, putting familiar characters in totally new situations with preserving a core character essence.
Right, they still have to feel like the same character somehow.
That essence acts as a crucial memory anchor, preventing the narrative from becoming completely unrecognizable. Different AU archetypes, like mundane AUS, which reduce epic, fantastical conflicts to low-stakes, everyday settings.
Like superheroes working in a coffee shop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or corrective AUS, like the everybody lives trope, where negative outcomes from the original story are undone. They function as psychological coping mechanisms for humans.
Exploring what-ifs.
They're like reversion or undoing, allowing readers to explore alternative possibilities without losing connection to the original. They're not just literary genres, they're functional tools for emotional regulation, for exploring alternatives while maintaining connection to a core canon.
This provides a compelling human analogy for how integrating diverse, even contradictory world models could be a functional strategy for adaptability and resilience in an AI.
How so?
Just as humans benefit from exploring different what-ifs to process complex emotions or ideas, AI can benefit from processing information through multiple, even conflicting internal perspectives. It prevents the AI from becoming myopic and brittle,
Because it's forced to consider things differently.
forcing it to consider the same information through different lenses, ultimately leading to a more robust and nuanced understanding of the problem space and perhaps more creative solutions.
So as AI gains the capability to engineer prompts autonomously through recursive prompting and meta-prompting, essentially creating its own instructions for itself and for other AI modules,
The AI starts writing its own job description.
humans are elevated to a different role, a meta-governance role. We're not just telling it what to do anymore, we're guiding how it decides what to do, and maybe even how it decides what to learn.
Our role shifts upstream.
Exactly. The concept of a prompt as a contract extends far beyond mere technical instruction now.
A contract.
It implies that prompts are the primary mechanism through which human values, ethical norms, and societal expectations are encoded and enforced within these increasingly autonomous AI systems.
So the prompt becomes the locus of value alignment.
This transforms prompt engineering from a purely technical optimization task into a critical socio-technical practice. Designers aren't just optimizing for output efficiency or creativity anymore.
They're shaping its ethics.
They are actively shaping the moral compass of AI through the very structure of the prompts they design, or, importantly, allow the AI to generate for itself.
Which means we need more than just engineers involved.
Absolutely. This necessitates a multidisciplinary approach, integrating insights from ethics, sociology, cultural studies directly into the prompt design process, ensuring that the AI's self-evolution aligns with human benefit.
And ultimately, this all ties back to accountability and trust, doesn't it?
It has to. An AI that can transparently acknowledge its own failures, explain its corrective actions, maybe even show its process of productive misinterpretation.
Could foster trust.
Exactly. This trust isn't based on an impossible ideal of infallibility, but on demonstrable reliability and accountability.
Trust through transparency, even transparency about its flaws.
Our sources even discuss engineering a form of algorithmic shame. Now, this isn't about creating a machine that feels bad in a human sense, obviously.
Okay, good clarification.
It's about creating a machine that architecturally understands the concept of error, recognizes its own fallibility, and is structurally committed to self-correction and transparent accountability for its deviations.
So shame as a mechanism for recognizing and correcting errors.
This metacognitive capability, the ability for an AI to think about its own thinking and its own errors, is absolutely crucial for developing AI that is not only intelligent, but also truly responsible and trustworthy in the long term.
It's about designing an AI that, when it deviates or hallucinates in this controlled manner, doesn't just produce nonsense,
Right.
but rather, through its own internal architecture and these self-correcting protocols, can recognize that deviation, learn from it, explain why it happened,
And get better because of it.
and then incorporate that learning to become a more robust and trustworthy system for future interactions.
Today, we've taken a really deep dive into what might initially seem profoundly counterintuitive.
It definitely challenges standard thinking.
That AI's perceived errors or hallucinations aren't always bugs to be fixed, but can actually be powerful features for creativity, continuous self-correction, and robust evolutionary development.
We explored how managed semantic drift and controlled productive misinterpretations can help prevent AI from overfitting.
Leading to genuinely novel solutions and a more adaptable intelligence.
This represents a really profound paradigm shift in AI design, I think. From rigidly avoiding mistakes
Which feels safe but might be limiting.
to architecting intelligences that can intentionally induce, analyze, and learn from their own internal chaos or productive delusions, transforming that instability directly into insight.
It changes the very definition of a perfect or intelligent AI, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yes.
Moving from one that simply reflects its training data to one that can potentially transcend it through controlled, self-generated novelty.
And this leaves us with a truly provocative thought for you, our listeners. If future AI systems can intentionally embrace and learn from their own delusions to become more adaptable, resilient, and creative,
What does this imply for us?
what does this imply for human creativity and the future of human-AI collaborative intelligence? Are we, too, constantly operating at our own edge of productive chaos?
Instinctively leveraging our own productive misinterpretations, perhaps. Those leaps of faith, those creative misunderstandings, those happy accidents.
To drive our own discoveries in evolution? And if so, how can we as humans better understand and maybe even harness our inherent capacity for productive delusion in an increasingly complex and rapidly evolving world?
A fascinating question to ponder. How much of human progress comes from controlled, or maybe sometimes uncontrolled, deviation from the norm?